What's up, everybody? This is Good Fight-ers. We are coming at you live. Connection, intention, purpose. You guys know what it is by now, but we want to reinstate the trifecta.
There we go.
I guess triple trifecta might be a double. I don't know. Is that 6? Anyways, guys, we're coming at you live. Sign?
9.
9?
Like cube.
All right. Well, connection, intention, purpose, guys. We're coming at you with the science today. Last week, art thief and art dealer were making an appearance. And, dude, I just want to say I love that conversation about good thief versus bad thief and dealing the art. And, man, that was awesome. So if you guys have not listened to that, go back and listen to it. But this is a really important thing because we're making our way through the three-legged stool, right? We want people to know, okay, who are we as chiropractors? What's important to us? What have we kind of found in our journey? And science is something that, both of us, we hold highly. And I think I left it on the voice message last night. I was like, I think chiropractic is the only profession where you can be an artist, a scientist, and a philosopher within the profession. You know what I mean?
1,000%. 1,000%, dude.
Yeah.
Ain't no short legs over here.
Ain't no short legs. We don't ride like that.
No wobbly stools.
Huh? All the tools?
No wobbly stools.
So, man, we got a ton of snow. It's like a foot out there. I don't know if you
Super cold here. It's like -8 today.
It's on the screen. Can't really see it. But yeah, guys, science today is going to be clutch. We're going to be pulling from a couple different sources. 2 of my favorite that I have found to be ones that I continually go through is Heidi Havoc's The Reality Check, and then James Chestnut's. So he has this whole thing called The Wellness Practice, but one of the books he has is called The 14 Foundational Premises for the Scientific and Philosophical Validation of Chiropractic Wellness Paradigm. And I love that right there because like so much chiropractic research is focused on pain, right? You and I have both voiced like opinion on like how irritating that is sometimes. Just like the focus is on pain, the focus is on neck pain, back pain. We know we're good at that. Okay. Like what?
Very one-dimensional.
Very one-dimensional. So like what else can we get into? But I thought we'd start with Heidi's stuff.
Yeah.
Have a couple different things. Obviously, when we discuss chiropractic, people are trying to flesh out the word subluxation. And I hate that they're trying to flesh it out and trying to bring in different things and terminology because, our lexicon, I think, is important, right?
Totally.
But at the same time,
makes us unique, right? So
it makes us unique. And I think and I don't know if you can touch on this too with like Didi's reasoning behind choosing subluxation or BJ's and why
there's a lot.
There's a lot of cool stuff that I think a lot of chiropractors miss. But I wanted to bring in like Heidi's simple explanation. Here's just what chiropractors mean by the term vertebral subluxation is a dysfunctional area in the spine that negatively affects health and well-being due to its influence on the nervous system. Like, just simply put, that's what subluxation is to a chiropractor. In my opinion, I think that's like as simple as it gets without like overcomplicating it, right?
So you can look at it.
Go ahead.
You can look at that so many different ways, right? So that's the beauty of that being so simple.
Right. Yeah, that's like the like breakdown we can get into, like the mental, physical, spiritual, emotional aspects of a subluxation. But that at its core is really what we're looking at. And I think that's who we are as chiropractors, like the subluxation and its effect on the nervous system. That's what we seek to, and intentionally, with purpose, seek to adjust, right? So
100%.
With that being said, she kind of goes into some stuff. And if you haven't picked up Heidi Havoc's book, I highly recommend, especially for you young chiros out there, because there's a lot of stuff that she goes over that she maintains philosophical congruency, which I love, and she addresses in her book. And she talks about, okay, this is what BJ Palmer and Didi said. How does it line up with the science today? And science supports it. I mean, people want to act like it doesn't, but it does. So.
Well, and the sweet part about what you just said is, they're looking at a lot of like the foundational writings and teachings of BJ and Didi, and what they were really going off of is intuition and theory, right? So like
Right. They didn't even
that's
have
the
all that we have today.
right. And in the history of science, how many scientists live and die and aren't validated till like 100 years after they're dead, right? Like they die penniless, and like most
Yeah.
of the time they're like in ridicule and like in exile because what they're saying whenever anything new is introduced in the scientific community that seems radical, it's almost instantly shot down, and like
Mm.
it's not demonized, but like it's not encouraged a lot of the time, and like they end up being
Right.
ridiculed, and ends up being 10, 50, 100 years later, there is validation to a lot of theories that
Right.
ended up being radical about. So it's cool that you
Right.
said that.
I love what you said there though about the theories too, because I think even nowadays we're so scared to use that terminology of a
For
theory,
sure, dude.
right?
100%.
Like,
Yeah.
but when you break it down to science at its core, they all start with a theory, right? But
Hmm.
then B, much of what we have today and are taught in not only chiropractic school but medical school, like anything, is theory. Like I was listening to the other day, just how a muscle actually works and its contraction. It's the sliding filament theory,
Yeah.
right? It's still a theory, and like we use it. Like how many times have we been taught that since middle school? Thousands of times. So it's funny to
Dang,
me
if
that.
you're learning the sliding filament theory in middle school, you got a nice little education system set up for yourself. I'm not gonna lie.
Well, maybe I lied. I don't know. I think I did, but I don't know if I actually did. Maybe at least high school.
Dang, you let me know where you went to high school, bro. And if I ever have kids, bro, they're going to your high school.
Indiana, shout out.
Yeah, for real.
Um, One thing that when we get back to Heidi's book is she talks about the subluxation, why it is crucial to the brain, and Chestnut touches on this too, because many people look at subluxation as purely a local phenomenon, right? Purely just bone out of place, fixed bone. It only impacts that area. But she talks about how for neuroscientists and how it's so important for the brain to keep an inner map of a position, especially of our spine, right? If it's housing our nervous system, keeping that internal map of the location of our muscles and joints in a 3D space and relative to each other, and how detrimental a faulty inner map can be for an individual. And she kind of goes into some different stuff, but I think it's cool to, when we think about a subluxation, we're really rewiring, we're really remapping what the brain sees, right?
Totally.
So with her stuff, I mean, man, she gets into a lot of stuff of how actual neurology works and scientists come into play. But then she discusses how if chiropractic is to maintain chiropractic, it's going to seek to change and impact the brain's internal reality and restoring proper processing and integration of sensory information, which alters the way the brain controls our body. And when we talk about, she discusses later what it takes to get into that physiological change, that neurological change. And she talks about how an adjustment, I think it's on page 45, how an adjustment versus mobilization or manipulation it has to be under 200 milliseconds in speed. And that was like the biggest game changer for me when I was going through school. I was like, dude, first of all, she talks about it can take up to 2 to 3 years to learn how to adjust at that speed. Okay, so that's about the time we're in school, a little bit longer, right?
Hmm.
Um, but you think about like you and I, we were in our technique classes. Dude, we were the only ones in there. I mean, outside of school, whatever, but in our technique classes, we were the only ones in there on adjusting day, like actually adjusting.
Yeah, dude, that was always like, I mean, it was sad for sure, but like
Right.
it was literally the same thing every time for sure.
It really was, and we
It,
got better for it too. We were trying out like different adjustments that usually we don't do. Like just the different stuff that we were learning. We're like, I don't know, let's just try it out, see how it goes.
right.
We were
Get
the
some
human guinea pigs for each other.
yeah, get some feedback too. I mean,
Yeah,
from Dr. Hines. I mean, Dr. Hines he's one of the cooler and like not in like a hey cool type way, but like
right.
I don't know, his background's super interesting to me, especially how he got his I don't know what the degree is, but he got an extra degree in like Palmer
So,
history.
like the philosophy.
Yeah,
Oh
the
yeah.
philosophy of history. So I thought that was like, I mean, that's
Well,
just
he
like
runs that whole department, right?
exactly. So I don't know, getting feedback from somebody like that to me is that's you can't
That's
really put a price tag
invaluable.
on that, you know? Yeah, exactly.
Right?
So yeah, we'd be the only ones in there like 95% of the time on adjusting days,
Right.
right? So
That's just wild to me. So like you think about all those people that hadn't adjusted up until that point. Maybe they adjusted in that last year of clinic, that last couple of months,
hmm
but then they get into practice and they're still going to take another 2 or 3 years to really solidify that speed and adjustment. Now, I'm not saying
totally.
I'm perfect in my speed or anything like that, but this
But
is something that,
reaching that like you said, that speed and then having the consistency to like repeat that speed, like
right,
that's not something that comes overnight, you know?
no, it definitely takes that cultivation.
You don't get that with a degree anyway, or as
No,
I can tell.
definitely. You don't automatically get speed. But that was one of my favorite parts in the book because then every time I lay my hands on somebody, my intention is okay, I need to be fast because I want to impact their nervous system. I want to physiologically change the way their inner mapping is.
hmm
So I need to be quick. That whole, I mean, both of us learning under Mally, just getting all that intention prior to the actual adjustment so we can be as quick as we can be. Um, Soft hands move fast, right? Like that was
Totally.
the premise. And that's what we were ingrained with. And I think I love that part about the chiropractic science is that if we're trying to influence the brain, we need to be at a certain threshold and hold ourselves to that standard too. Because it's very easy to go in and be like, I'll just mobilize this bone. Like, very easy to get in that rut. But guys, when we talk about connection, intention, and purpose, like we need to have that intention and that purpose after we connected with our patient to give a proper chiropractic adjustment.
Dude, can't can't put any more emphasis on it than that, dude. Um,
Right.
speed's king, right? I mean, in a way, you need to have a whole bunch of other things in place, but you need to add speed. Speed's essential to a chiropractic adjustment for sure.
Sure.
I I had a pretty cool correlation to with what you kind of went off with the the impact on the nervous system and the brain. So this is from Brain's Way of Healing by Norman Doidge. So this is a page talking about brain injury, just put it in context. So in a brain injury from whatever cause, toxins, stroke, infection, radiation therapy, trauma like a blow to the head, some sort of
Mhm.
degenerative disease, neurons die and they cease to give off signals. But others are damaged. And the key is these don't necessarily like become silent. So living brain tissue by nature is excitable, just like other like muscle tissue. Like it
Right.
has like a resting potential, right? So it's
Right.
excitable. And even when a brain circuit's off, it continues to give some sort of like electrical signal. So although it's
Oh,
different, but it's at a slower rate than it is when it's activated or kind of like when it's on, like an on switch. So in this view, the brain's kind of like the heart. So at rest, it doesn't stop. Rather, it kind of shifts into like a resting state. So when the heart's electrical system's damaged, like with a MI or a heart attack,
yeah.
um, it loses the ability to regulate the firing rate. So it gives off like kind of aberrant signals, and it loses and it has various kinds, like with like the natural pacemakers that it has. So they may
Mm.
run too slowly, or they might be like running too fast, or like tachycardia, like increase elevated heart rate.
Yeah.
So this leads to irregular beats or arrhythmia and dysrhythmia. So same thing, like concepts with the brain. So like kind of talking
Yeah.
like noisy brain. I've ever heard anybody like, oh, I'm just in bed and I just like feel like my brain's just running 100 miles a minute. So
Mm.
in the brain, these irregular signals have an effect on all the networks that they're connected to. So messing up their functions as well as um, messing up their functions as well, unless the brain can shut down the damaged neurons. So the damaged neurons are like sending all these like messy signals, right? Like they're
Yeah.
just like they're like at this resting state that's not
It's like that,
in
the
tune.
fuzzy on a TV.
Exactly. Yeah, static like on a telephone wire, right?
Yeah.
That's what we talk about a lot. So in many brain problems, we know neurons are firing at the wrong or unusual rates. So problems like epilepsy, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's,
Mm.
stuff like this, many sleep problems, brain injuries, um, they create a noisy brain because so many signals are out of sync. Something similar is seen in the aging brain, in the brains of children with learning disorders and sensory problems when neurons can't fire sharp, clear signals.
Yeah.
So when sick neurons are rendered healthy, or render the healthy ones that receive their regular signals ineffective, they become dormant. So like they're just like hanging out.
Yeah.
And then let's see. So more recent study. So this was is in the book. He talks about it. It's called Taubes group. So using brain scans, it's shown that when a stroke kills neurons, what's called like an infarct, kind of the same thing as like a heart attack, the infarct
Yeah.
area. Other neurons are still living, but far from dead cells can show signs of atrophy or wasting away.
Okay.
So kind of a lot there, right? But
So
overall,
they don't actually die. They're there. They just are in a more dormant state.
right? And like kind of like a use it or lose it type thing. And not like they're damaged. So like they're out of sync, right? And then you stop
Right.
kind of using that area. And like you kind of start relying on other areas of your brain, or at
Mm.
least in somebody who's healthy, brain super complex, kind of like you can kind of like your brain can rewire the patterns it needs to use to access certain parts.
Yeah.
So some of those areas that are damaged, unless you find a better way to access that part of your brain, they'll start like getting smaller and
Like
it's not.
atrophy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So I just thought that was pretty cool, and
Well, that
kind of like
reminds
a
me of what's when we talk about traumatic brain injury, especially with like NFL players today, right?
right.
And it's a similar concept. They
Yeah,
have gotten hit so many times that it's affecting their brain. But what was the guy's name? He was the quarterback, and he received atlas orthogonal or something. Um,
I've never heard of this.
oh, really?
I don't think so.
I think he was the quarterback for the 49ers. I can't remember what his name is, but we watched it and
Steve Young
maybe
might have been Steve Young, or could have been Joe Montana, or shoot, if it's like
maybe he wasn't the 49ers, but so anyways, he was talking about he had these effects on his brain because he had gotten so many traumas, so many micro traumas over the years. And he just like couldn't he was trying to do puzzles, like his brain, just like you said, like that scatter was just there.
mm-hmm.
And when you talk about that, his brain's literally atrophying in like daily
Yeah,
going through that. But he received his adjustment, and he talks about how it felt like the toilet got flushed, like everything that was like not functioning right just got like cleared out.
dude. Yeah,
And that's
CSF flow is that's so huge. I mean, what can you imagine is more impactful on like your brain to regulate,
right. Well, and it
damage?
was that connection too, right? Like he had such a block up
Yeah,
that hadn't been reconnected for so many years, and when it was reconnected, I think kind of like we were saying, that neuron, even though it was dormant before, it had that, I don't know, it reconnected, like the lights came on, and he was like, oh, this is how it's supposed to feel, and he wasn't like perfect or anything like that, but just to touch on that point where the atrophy comes into play, but it's not like it's irreparable.
no,
Trans,
exactly.
you know?
But over the over the longer amount of time that you have these, certain parts of your neurons, brain atrophying, the smaller, atrophy is just like the kind of like the shrinkage, right, of like your
Right.
muscle tissue. You see any? anybody put a cast on over like 3 months, their arms are going to be smaller than the one that wasn't in the cast, right? So,
Right.
And with the brain, that just like impacts the ability to whatever, whatever part of your brain that's uses that hippocampus or, whatever area is damaged, the
Right.
functions of that area obviously are going to follow suit. So,
Right.
and
That
the
totally
ability
makes
for you to
sense.
bounce back is going to be less.
Well, and she was talking about too in her book, and how that spinal dysfunction, that subluxation comes into play with how, like how detrimental it is to the chronic issues, right? And when we have that atrophy, we have that spinal segment that's subluxated for a long period of time. It affects how the brain perceives and controls the spine, and then how it perceives and controls the rest of the body.
Dude,
So,
I found this really cool. Um, so it's this study done in Germany, and it relates or it's talking. So a lot of people, in chiropractic, a lot of people really like to focus on the myofascial system, right?
right,
So this is like a really cool parallel to how the brain impacts the myofascial system, and I think it's pretty. It really goes well with what we're talking about today. So, um, so this is in context of the book. So Feldenkrais, he was like one of the main researchers that worked on the brain's way of healing. So
yeah,
Feldenkrais said he wanted not flexible bodies but flexible brains, which would create flexible bodies in his eyes. His
right,
colleagues helped him with body tensions, spasticities, postural problems, and one of his colleagues would stretch the fascia to free up the person's range of motion based on the assumptions that the fascial layers kind of have those adhesions that make them stick. And the Feldenkrais practitioners, they did it a little differently. So they claimed that it was the brain that caused the restrictions.
yeah,
So the head of this research group at Ulm University in Germany set up a study, and his colleagues examined patients with like restrictions in their muscles and like their fascia, and they put them under anesthesia. And the hypothesis was that like the restriction being caused by the brain would then, when the brain's under anesthesia, would kind of like cause some of the myofascial system to like chill out, just if
yeah,
it's controlled by the brain, right? So
right,
they ended up finding that most of the previous detected restrictions appear to be significantly improved, if not absent, during the condition of anesthesia. The scene that would have been perceived as mechanical tissue fixation may at least be partially due to neuromuscular regulation, which I don't
yeah,
think many, if hardly anybody, hears that type of message, especially when you're working on, uh,
no,
I mean, nothing wrong with it, but like Graston and like a lot of soft tissue techniques where they're really working on fascia and like loosening up fascia. This literally just says that the brain is the main proprietor of that tension. So yeah,
right,
you keep getting rid of that fascia, that tension, but you're not getting rid of that main problem, right? There's some dysfunction in the
right.
brain causing that tension. So I thought that was really cool
That's
and
really
very eye
interesting.
opening.
Yeah, especially when like you talk about, like, where do most people get fascia work done?
PT,
Yeah, but I mean
massage
like
therapist.
where on their
Oh,
body?
shoot, probably traps, low back.
Yeah, I'm thinking too, like a lot of people get it done on their extremities, right?
Yeah,
How many chiros out there adjust the extremity properly when they do
small
their fascia?
percent.
I don't know many.
Good
If you
morning.
do, props to you. But I don't know. There's a lot that goes into that, that I think it brings it back around to how important the adjustment is. You can't neglect it. You can't neglect
100%.
a portion of, like, yeah, I feel really good if I get Graston or something. Well, actually, I feel horrible because it hurts. But but if you're not getting that adjustment with it, then, like you said, that fascia, that neurointegration too. And on the other part too, like they talk a lot about this in KTC, is how the fascia speaks to the brain, and how when you are adjusting, when you are um, providing a force into that fascia, and it's its stimulation into the brain in that course back, how important it is.
Yeah,
Because if you are speaking into the fascia, but then you're also speaking into the nervous system, and it has that ripple effect, right? You have anatomy trains that comes into that. So if you're doing Graston and stuff, like, yeah, that's a part of it. But if you aren't providing that ripple effect through the fascia, then it's not going to speak to the brain in the same way either.
totally. And you always want to, I mean, my eyes and as chiropractors, you always want to do the single greatest thing for somebody. So,
Yeah,
you know, um, might provide temporary relief working on certain things, but if you could provide something of greater value that could ultimately, you know, impact two different or multiple facets of dysfunction, I mean, that should be the name of the game for you right there.
heck
So,
yeah. Why don't you speak
um,
to some of what you found in Dee Dee's stuff too before we
so
get into? I got chestnut stuff, so I want to dive into Dee Dee stuff real quick.
totally. So some of the cool things with the early like 1900s when DD was really developing and creating the foundations of chiropractic, where
Yeah.
he was really having to battle even the concepts of spinal misalignments. And
Mm-hmm.
there was a lot of early research done by like the medical community, really trying to figure out, anything from like dislocations or like complete, I don't know. There's like a trying to think of the actual article what it goes over, but essentially the definition of luxation was being researched, I guess is the right word, but really trying to figure out the degree of what would actually cause the distortions and more specifically the spine and the amount of force and like the ways to actually reduce and impacts on the body. So one thing they would obviously do is they would probably, not probably, they would put somebody under anesthesia, like I just talked about, but back in like early, probably like it's called like 1900. Anybody with like a severe wry neck or some sort of what's the term, tortipelvis type predisposition, they would essentially put them under anesthesia and force them into like a corrected position, and they obviously didn't really understand the implications, and this was a forced maneuver. It was a manipulation in a way that would be mechanically correct, but often one of the biggest things that they would be doing, or they would have to, oh, it's they would essentially have to like kind of warn people that what they would do could potentially really, really harm them, or maybe even kill them in some instances with somebody with like a wry neck, because I mean they were doing it in such a manipulative way that they would just, I mean, it's a mechanical fix. So for them, if they saw
Yeah.
somebody with like a wry neck, they would put them under anesthesia and really just like crank their head or whatever to like fix it or try to. And some people would get better, right? I mean, some
Right.
people would get better. That's what they did end up finding. And um, I can't exactly remember like the discussion talking about luxation versus like total dislocation, but
Mm.
they did. It is in there. It's in the adjuster. I don't have it pulled up exactly, but
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of.
One thing that I love about, and I don't know if you just touched on this, but when I was when I was probably like third try, and just the discussion of subluxation and its true meaning, and partial the reason why they chose it was because, in the medical community, subluxation could be defined as like the dislocation aspect of it,
Right.
but then there's also the double portion of it where it's sub, underneath,
Less than.
less than, and then lux is light.
Yep.
And that like whole concept of less light flowing through the nerves is just mind blowing. Did you just touch on
Totally.
that?
No, but that's a really good
Oh.
point, and that's something that like when we were early in school, that's like something that's like whoa. I guess like one of the first
Right.
first
Right.
things
You're like,
like
oh, it's
dang, like
not just
that's like such
it's
like
revel
a deep thought, right? So
yeah.
it's like, oh, that's very profound for me to think of it in that way early on. And the more you learn about light is it's another frequency of matter and energy, just like
Mm,
everything else that we experience, right? So a reduction of frequency, a reduction of matter, or like that mental
yeah,
impulse, that flow of light, of um, life force, right? Um,
right.
that's what that subluxation is.
That was that mind blowing moment too, where I was like, okay, it's not just a mechanical fix.
Right.
It's a whole, and Chestnut touches on this, and we've been through this with Mally's stuff too. It's neurology, kinesiology. There was like five
There
different.
there's I have eight, or no, I have nine different ways you can qualitative and quantitative properties of subluxation.
And maybe that's what
So
it is because there was all those different ones.
so
Real
in
quick.
qualitative
Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
so qualitative properties, you can have like kinetic energy. The vascular bed can be just,
Mm,
you have subluxation of the vascular bed, nerve function, muscular function, biochemical functions. I mean, that's
right.
where you kind of get into like some of what you really work with lots of times wellness way. Like
Yeah.
biochemical functions for sure are qualitative
Yeah.
properties. And you can get into
Yeah.
quantitative stuff with like myologic system, syndesmologic system, arthrology, and osteologic proportions. So I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know,
And
it's very deep.
so that with those nine too, what I love is that you can't have you can't just isolate one and you can't leave out one.
Right.
Like they're all impacted. They're all
They're
you
all
can.
ingredients in the same cake.
Yep. Oh man, and I love when this science develops like this because I mean you and I have heard it like chiropractors are quacks, like we don't know what we're talking about. There's no science to validate what we're talking about. There hasn't been enough research because we're still like a young profession. This was just something that I was thinking about in regards to theory and now where science is actually moving in the direction of validation. And well, it has been, but um, the breakdown of it is they get caught. Some people get caught up on the theory, but
Mm-hmm.
it, like you were talking about earlier, and I kind of forgot to mention this is, do you want to think about like how medicine started, how we actually found out about the human body was because people were doing things that were illegal. They were snatching bodies and studying them, and there's all these different things where like pe- people want to talk about the weird beginnings of chiropractic and like, oh, was Harvey Liller actually deaf, or like what was adjusted, and they want to harp on that. But at the end of the day, like, man, medicine, it's some weird stuff too.
Totally.
Many
Dude,
people
what?
might think, yeah,
The amount of weird stuff that you read about still today that goes on, it's like, yeah, but I heard
yeah,
in China they're giving people anal swabs for COVID testing. I mean, talk about doing weird shit, man. I don't
some weird,
takes the
weird
cake.
stuff. Weird stuff for sure. So, I mean, that was just something that I forgot to mention earlier that I wanted to bring around because I saw something in Chestnut's book, but yeah, man, all those pieces of the pie that come into play with chiropractic and the adjustment, that's what I love about it.
Same.
There's not just it's not just a local phenomenon. And in fact, you can't even have that. That's not even Chestnut touches on this in his book here. Um, he talks about the idea of like what's the medical paradigm versus chiropractic paradigm.
Mm,
And in it, he talks about we study physiology, not pathology, because we recognize that most of what allopathy labels as pathology is actually the body mind attempting in the most intelligent way possible to adapt to the stressful environment in which it has been placed. This paradigm is what determines both the goal of chiropractic care and the unique contribution chiropractic has to make to humankind. Chiropractic endeavors to provide physiologically compatible care in order to support the human being's innate abilities to adapt to the environment
dang.
and to regain homeostasis and health. Like
I need
that
to find. Go ahead.
that has been one of the main like things when I look at chiropractic versus allopathy, and obviously allopathy has its place, medical model has its place, emergency medicine I think is bar none to what I don't want to be breaking somebody's chest open for a heart attack, right?
For sure.
But when you talk about physiologically compatible care, that is at its core chiropractic. We
Yeah,
always
dude.
need to be seeking that physiological compatible care, because with that 9 that you just listed, we're not seeking to manipulate anything within that. We are merely making it so that any one of those 9 can function as they should without inhibition. We're
100%, bro.
not adding or detracting, right? So I love the idea of physiologically compatible care, and that's what makes us so different, is that we're not trying to manipulate the body in the way of like what we think it should necessarily do, or we're not trying to you know, we're not trying to boost it or enhance it
No,
because it has all the capabilities it needs. It just needs no interference. You know?
100%. One thing we provide to people when they come to our practice, is just explaining how chiropractic is different than medicine. So
Yeah, that
we just always
mindset shift is huge.
it is, and establishing the lack of boundaries, right? Like the
Mm.
really kind of reconditioning, I guess, the
Yeah,
process of it.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Really, I mean, a lot of people don't hear this, but like health and well-being, those are normal. Like those are normal things that you should want
Mm-hmm.
to strive for and attain, because those are what we're, I mean, what's another word for normal, right? Like that's just literally what we're supposed to be.
Right.
And having them, really setting up and having them understand that your nervous system controls everything, and that this system can be overloaded, and how it's overloaded, that's what we take care of, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
you remove that interference, restore health, like that's huge. So
right. That's what I
simple,
always
simple,
tell.
simple.
Right, and that's what I tell my patients too. Is just like, you have your body has a million tasks to keep track of. How can we remove tasks within your body, especially when it comes down to subluxation? Like, that's a task that your body has to keep track of, and not only that, it minimizes its ability to do other tasks properly.
Totally.
And usually that's when the light bulb goes on from there, like, oh yeah, like, it makes sense that I wouldn't want my body to be bogged down with, I use the example of, like, if I were to give you homework for the rest of the week, would you rather do 10 things of homework, or would you rather do one? Like, everybody would choose one unless you're crazy.
Right,
So
exactly.
we're trying to minimize the amount of homework the body has to do and keep track of, so that it can be normal, just like you said, it can be at that homeostatic function.
Yeah. One thing I always think about was one of your videos that you had, bro, of allostatic load.
Mm,
And I found something in The Bigness of Fellow Within by BJ Palmer that
yeah.
to me, that was like a visual of like what this little portion is talking about. And it's talking about concussion of forces. So there's the external invasionary force and the internal resistant force.
Right.
So, and there's obviously amplitudes of both. So just
This
talking
is from,
statically. Yeah, yep. So this is operating on the presumption that we have 100% internal resistance, like 100%, right? So like
right.
that's just if we're operating at our best. So um, if there's an external invasionary force of 400% or 300 or 3 times greater than the resistance, result could be fracture or some sort of break in the body.
Yeah.
If if their internal resistance is still 100%, let's say we have a 300% external invasionary force or twice greater than that 100% resistance, result could be a dislocation. If that external invasionary force is about 200% or about, 1 time greater than our internal resistance, the result could be a subluxation.
Mm.
So, talking about different amplitudes of invasionary forces of the body and operating at 100% resistance of that internal force,
Yeah.
that's, different ways that like I feel like viewing, you talking about subluxation and what is it and relation to like dislocation and fractures. I feel like that's it right there. Like you're not
Mm.
always going to have those same amount of forces coming into the body that are going to produce a fracture, right? But there's still
Right.
damage. There's still your system's still perceiving that. Like it's just like
Yeah.
just because you didn't have a break or a dislocation doesn't mean that that couldn't have been harmful to your system, right? So
Oh, yeah.
I feel like that's a big misconception that some people have with their bodies and just like life in general. Like you miss a step going down the stairs, you didn't like break something or you didn't dislocate your leg, right? But you can still injure
Yeah.
yourself, right?
Yeah.
So um and the big takeaway is a lot of people aren't operating at that 100% internal
Oh,
resistant force. You're not. Most people aren't operating at 100% ability to adapt, to be
yep.
adaptable to their environment. So
Yep.
um, the biggest thing is that's why like the location or subluxations or sickness and disease is that lowered resistance, right? That's what the
Yeah.
real sickness is, right? So um,
Right.
that's
And
why subluxations, fractures, dislocations are more likely to happen in sick, more likely elderly people
yeah.
than a healthy young person because they have
And
less internal resistance.
yep. And yet, who sees chiropractic least?
Probably our
Right.
generation or our age group, right?
When we're at our prime ability to create internal adaptation versus internal reaction forces, and yet we neglect it the most because we're fine, right?
Yep,
And one thing that I think goes along with that, you mentioned like you don't necessarily have to hurt yourself to have an impact. And Chestnut kind of dives into this a little deeper as far as like nociception,
mm-hmm.
pain.
Yep,
You have perceived nociception, and you have perceived nociception as you feel it. Like if I like strain my back, like that's perceived nociception. But if I, let's say I'm lifting and there's something, I have a sublux vertebra in my low back. Well, that can still have brain perceived nociception, but I don't inherently view it as pain. It doesn't have to be painful, but
for
my
sure.
body still creates an internal acute stress response to that. So like your physiological response when you have a subluxation, you don't need to feel pain. Because we talked about this a little bit before, but you don't need to feel that pain. And when you're going down the steps, and even though you might not feel pain when you walk downstairs, because like we're 20s, right? Like many of us don't feel pain when we go downstairs. But is our brain perceiving that subluxation as nociception, which it does? And
Yeah,
if you read Chestnut's book, he dives into a little bit deeper. But actually, let me pick up this part here real quick because he talks about the acute stress response and how it's full impact on the body.
yeah,
And that's what kind of he touches on that allostatic load, which is also where I got this from.
cool.
But acute stress response, and if you know physiology, you know all these. It's 18, so it's a little bit longer, but increased cortisol, increased catecholamines, increased heart rate, increased vasoconstriction, increased blood pressure, increased blood glucose levels, increased blood lipid levels, increased blood cholesterol levels, increased clotting factors, increased protein degradation of muscle and connective tissue, insulin resistance, increased feelings of stress, fear, anxiety, depression, decreased short-term memory, ability to concentrate and learn new material, decreased serotonin levels, increased noradrenaline levels, increased sensitivity of sensory systems, including those for pain, decreased cellular immunity, decreased anabolic hormones like growth hormone, testosterone, luteinizing hormone, bone loss, muscle fiber, and type changes. So these are 18 acute stress responses that happen when you have a sublux vertebra,
Wow,
right? How many of those 18 can you attribute to many of the health conditions and diseases that we have today?
99%.
Pretty, pretty much all of them, right?
Yeah,
Like you get into this factor of like, okay, even though you might not be feeling pain, if you have a subluxation, you still have an acute stress response going on that can also turn into a chronic stress response that has all those 18. And those 18 over time, you talk about being in your 20s, these 18 over time create issues down the line.
totally.
And
And
that, go ahead.
so I mean, just kind of like piggybacking on the ability, or like you're not perceiving the pain.
Right.
Only 10% of our nervous system is dedicated to even nociception in general.
Isn't that
So
wild?
yeah, it's,
So
I
that
mean,
means the rest. That means the rest is configuration.
well, I mean, you think about it, the brain's sending millions of messages per second. So
Yeah.
pain's a very like infinitesimal portion of like the percentage of like the amount of things that your brain and your like innate is processing all the time,
Yeah. Yeah.
like from me digesting my coffee to uh, literally every function of your body, right? It's just like constantly in communication and keeping tabs on every cell, gland, muscle, organ. So like
Yeah.
pain, that's like yeah, it does. Yeah, that's a portion, but like 10%. Like
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that's just like a really big perspective that a lot of people don't understand
Hmm.
with their own body. Like that's the thing that not just me, not just like a theoretical body. That's your body.
Right.
Your body's like that's how you're designed too.
Right. Well, and you talked about thresholds earlier, and each body is different within their threshold, within those resistant forces, right? Like
Hmm.
what you mentioned, like elderly versus young, but then also like how you and I perceive are different, and how Chantel and I, or Leilani and I, or Leilani and you, like people don't understand all the time is why I'm getting adjusted more than somebody, or what is taking place. Like us as business owners, just starting into practice, and like we're pretty active dudes too. Like we're gonna need adjusted more
Right.
if we were at a time of like, I don't want to say bliss, but like you know what I mean, like less stress in its environment
Totally, dude. I mean,
because it
there's
has
just
that, because
no.
those
Go
nine
ahead.
factors come into play, right?
Yes, sir.
Love
Exactly
it.
right. Um, One other thing that I thought was pretty cool that I found in the bigness. So this is just like in relation to regeneration, almost kind of like the healing process, or at least like the replacement of like our cells. So obviously, everybody knows we're constantly, at least most people understand, we're constantly kind of like shedding our bodies, like old cells are replacing with new cells.
Yeah.
So some areas are faster than others. Some parts are take more time, but
Right.
it's generally recognized that we build a complete new body every 7 years. So if we
That's wild.
shed, isn't that crazy, right? Like that's what I always try to, um, I've had a lot of people, at least people close to me that I've been working with on the development of self and just like changing their habits and just changing their mindset. And literally like the physiological portion of it is like you can be a completely new person in 7 years
Wow.
without even lifting a finger. So like imagine if you put the work in and really want to take effort to changing who you are and even just like your mindset. The changes are you can't even like you can change however you want to be. Like the possibilities are limitless. Um,
Right.
so if we shed one tissue cell at a time at 1 second of a time, and another tissue cell comes and takes its place in 1 second of a time, this would be normal growth, right? That's just like the normal
Yeah.
rate. You lose a cell, you
Right.
replace a cell. And if we shed one tissue cell in 1 second at a time, the normal process, um, and replace that loss with one tissue cell in 3 seconds of a time, and then there are two less cells or two cells subnormal in that unit of time. It's like it took a little bit more time to replace that one cell. So the process was a
Right.
little bit sub. So if we multiply time by like months or years, you have somebody who has he describes it as Lilliputian. I'm not really even sure what that means, but like to me, conceptually, I can kind of imagine like in surgery, right? Like if somebody has like the gallbladder removed, usually
Right.
it's not because it's a live functioning gallbladder. It's because it's a deficient dead gallbladder that doesn't have a purpose. And
Yeah. According to the,
once how does a once live organ in a live body die? I mean,
right.
it's process in my mind. They're not
Yeah.
replacing their cells in a uh, a
Decrease.
efficient
It
manner.
comes down to decreased life force to that
Yep,
area.
yep. And then this is really cool too that he gets into. So in that same thing, we shed one tissue cell in 1 second at a time, the normal process of shedding, and replace that loss with three tissue cells in 1 second at a time. Now we have two more tumor.
Mm.
two more tissue cells
Dang, so you have
in it.
constant balance.
Yes, in a normal unit of time. And overall, if we, over months, years, we have a giant, or if it's in a specific body organ or region of the body, we have a tumor, two more.
Wow.
So
Two
like
more.
that's how he
Yeah.
writes it, right? So like
Yeah.
it's a double entendre, tumor and two more of like
Yeah.
tissue cell growth. And to me, what's
Dude.
regulating that? How does the brain, the noisy brain, keep tabs on
Mhm.
how, like the cell regulation? Too much, the amount. How does it find that perfect resting potential of one for one? It's when it can
Nate.
communicate, connected,
Yeah.
innate.
Yeah.
But like that's what we're dealing with, right? Like the
Right.
body to perceive itself.
Yep. There's but one cause of disease, and that's the body's inability to perceive its internal or external environment.
The theory is there. Hey, maybe a year from now it'll come out that that's the true cause of all cancer, right? I don't know.
I don't
But
know. But
to
it's
me that theory
shout
makes a
out
lot
to
of
the
sense.
human body though. What's up?
Shout out to the human body though.
Shout out human body, man, because that balance of replication and destruction is wild. Like
Yeah.
getting that across to people's heads that like, dude, you can do bodily functions without having to think about it. Like innate is astounding. We don't have to think about the science of how our cells replicate. It just does it. But when we have decreased communication with innate, then it can't do it properly. So then we have
Yep.
two more or not enough. Wow. Speaking of that point then too, I want to bring up BJ's quote about our profession as well. While other professions are concerned with changing the environment to suit the weekend body, chiropractic is concerned with strengthening the body to suit the environment.
Hell yeah.
What's the environment?
Hell yeah.
This dude, yeah. I will
The human
always see this.
existence, human
Human
experience. That's
existence.
the environment.
Right. And that's one thing that like so I was talking to a few people about this last night, the object of vaccination, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which nowadays very sensitive subject, and at the end of the day, like you can feel free to make
Sensitive if
whatever.
you're insecure about it, I guess. I don't know. I feel like anything else, if you can have a conversation about it and
That's
not
true. That's true. That's a
get
great
emotional,
point.
then I don't know, you're able to critically have a intellectual conversation.
Right. Right. And right now we're seeking to push something upon a weakened body,
Right.
not strengthen our suit. And I was just describing that process as like, okay, you can make whatever decision you want, but at the end of the day, like, what two categories are you fitting in? Are you weakened and you are just providing something to that weakened state, or are you strengthening the suit of armor so that
Yeah.
when you come in contact? I don't know, man.
Figuring out ways to explain that to people to a way that they like, oh, I guess that makes sense.
Right.
Means a lot. I mean, I think that goes a long way. And for me, for guys like us or athletes, I think it's really easy to equate it to, does it make more sense, for the overall, integrity and toughness of your team? Does it make more sense to play a soft as shit schedule against teams that are bad? Like, do you just want to play like pee-wee football players your entire,
Yeah, bump that.
your entire season, or do you want to play strong? Even though you're going to be playing strong teams, do you want to have a stronger team that do you ever want to have
Yeah.
a better strength program, better practice regimen, or do you just want to like play worse teams? You know what I mean? Like, it's
Yeah.
just like,
Yeah.
how do you have a stronger team in the end of the day, right? Um, that analogy was less than perfect, but I don't know.
I digged it. I hope
Okay.
people connected with it. Do you have anything else that you want to throw in here? I want to end on a particular part that Chestnut touches on,
Go
but I
for it,
want
bro.
to dive into anything that you got anything else though that you wanted to dive into?
Honestly, I pretty much covered most of everything. I did have a little bit on the process of. Honestly, I can save it for a different day. It doesn't really quite tie into what we were going over, but I had it,
Yeah.
in the repertoire if the conversation led there. But dude, I'll save it for another day. It's all good. Go ahead.
Okay. Sweet. Yeah. So when Chestnut's kind of talking about the introduction of the vertebral subluxation complex and how dis-ease comes into play. Um, and he kind of talks about how the subluxation is a cause or type of non-homeostatic cellular physiology and adaptative cellular function. And he says, so where did, sorry, I thought Chantel was crying for a second. So where does that leave us? Right where D.D. Palmer wants us to be. We restore homeostatic function by removing interferences to and providing essential raw materials for homeostatic function. By the way, proper somatosensory afferent input into the cerebral cortical loops of life is absolutely recognized as essential in an ingredient for homeostatic mind-body function and health. And proper spinal joint motion and alignment are essential for proper somatosensory afferent input.
Yes,
How
sir.
the body responds to the correction of VSC, so vertebral subluxation complex, depends on how many other interferences we remain and how many other essential ingredients for proper functioning are missing. We do not treat disease. We do not treat symptoms. We remove interference and provide ingredients for homeostatic function for health and wellness. And I don't know. Snaps, yep. Snaps for
Yeah,
that.
snap that one up. That one's
Yeah.
wild.
I think we get so caught up in that pathology, man. We don't treat disease.
Totally.
We remove whatever is interfering
Yeah.
with the
I
body,
mean,
what it does. Did you download
my
that Wim Hof app?
I did. Yeah.
Did you
I've
go
been
through
trying
the
to do
guide?
more. I've definitely been incorporating back into my regimen. I was really good about taking cold showers in the summer and
Nice.
even into the fall, but kind of fell off when it started getting cold. The temperature started dipping down, but I've started getting back into that. And honestly, it's kind of interesting. I mean, I need to have this warm period where I can at
Yeah,
least increase my body temperature at first, but then I end it at
yeah,
least with 30 seconds or more. At least this week, I'll probably bump it up more the more I keep going.
right.
But yeah, the it's been going really well, man. Really helping me ground myself with the breathing,
Well,
the breath work.
in it when he does the guided meditation, I don't know if you've done it too.
Haven't done
He,
that yet.
oh, you should do it because in it he talks about. He said, "Let the body do what it is capable of doing."
Nice,
And that
dude.
just ties in so nicely to we don't treat disease. Let the body do what it's capable of doing. Remove that interference, man.
Yes, sir.
At the end of the day, science, science, man.
Science
Love it,
is
man.
it's not a perfect method. There's definitely inherent flaws just because our human experience is limited to our five senses, but that's not the limit to the universal experience.
Ooh,
And
boom.
um, I mean, the more you learn about physics and the more you learn about, I don't know, the intricacies of um, the like just like experiences that that occur in the universe, like the more you realize we're pretty limited in scope with the scientific method. Like it's just we can only
Yeah,
perceive
yeah.
very little on the spectrum. So um, I think you know humbling research, I mean, like in my eyes, like it humbles it more to like, yeah, like that's cool, but like in my opinion, at the end of the day, like that is still in scope limited to what we perceive because this is
Yeah,
reality. And like I know they do the best that they can to create an environment to where it's like very controlled, to where they only have one variable and one like the rest is control.
yeah,
But when it comes to healing, it comes to the human body, it comes to human experience, it's not that way ever. There's infinite variables because
right.
you know what I mean. Just like there's anybody's upbringing, anybody's history, like those are just so many variables with that you can't even account for them in a way. So
Right.
not to downplay the importance of research or anything like that. That's the opposite. It is important, and I just want to say that having that grand scheme, that scope is important too.
Right. Yep. You got to take it all into account. Don't be so linear necessarily.
Nope.
Yes, sir. Dang, I
Cool,
love that.
bro. What a day.
What
Coming
a
in hot
day.
on a
Super
Sunday,
Bowl
Super Bowl
Sunday coming in
Sunday.
hot. Super Bowl Science Sunday.
Yes, sir. Who are you taking today?
I mean, I got to go with Mahomes, man.
For sure.
Brady, we got some, I mean, obviously with the Colts, man, you got some bad
Bad
blood.
blood.
He doesn't need no more championships. Although I will say, dude, how old is he? 43?
40. Dude, I think probably 43. Maybe, I don't know why I'm thinking it's 45 sounds right, but.
Anyways, dude is phenomenal for his age.
He's 43.
That can't be disputed. So,
I mean, that guy's doing something different in his. I mean, he's been operating differently for a while, and I think with some of these elite athletes like LeBron James, Tom Brady, that have this longevity and elite level of performance, look what they're doing, right? Like with their bodies. Of course, people always like, oh yeah, well they have millions of dollars to spend. I get that for sure, but in a way,
what can you do?
A lot too? Like, if you're going to be spending thousands of dollars on your health insurance, which is important. I mean, I'm not saying don't have a health insurance, but like, there's more to health than just being able to be ready for like a car accident, right? So like, why not invest more into your body outside of health insurance?
Yeah.
Actually promote healthy habits and healthy lifestyle things that can prevent you from ever having those breakdowns.
Right.
Like these guys, right? I mean,
right. I came out with something last spring that I like to term the 200-year lifestyle. And it's still like a work in progress, but like if I live in such a way to live to 200, then I should be able to make it to like at least 100, right? Like
totally.
that was
hey,
a mindset.
Dude.
Like if I'm trying to get to that point, then like shoot for the stars, and I'll still
speak it into existence, bro.
Right.
Rip Van Winkle, man.
Rip Van Winkle that?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what's up, man. Well, brother, it's been awesome talking about science today. I hope everybody listening had some great we dove into a lot, but definitely get into some of the books we mentioned too.
Where can we pick up Heidi Havoc at? Is that Barnes and Noble?
I'm pretty sure it's on her web. I'm pretty sure it's on her website. Yeah,
okay.
I think you can pick it up from there. I think it's on Amazon too. Chestnuts is only on his website, from what I remember. I can put those in the show notes though too. And if you don't have DD's books, then you gotta get on that.
Yeah. And I mean, if anybody has read some of these books and wants to kind of reach out and talk about that too, I'd love to hear more about them, because I don't have Heidi Havoc or James Chestnut. I'd love to hear more about that. If anybody listening or watching has any insight, I'd love to hear about it, because I mean, their interpretation can be different than mine. That's for sure.
Hey, let's connect. Connection.
With some intention.
With some intention. Always a heck of a lot of purpose.
Choose your destiny.